On a clear night, the sky is filled with stars. Every of the world's peoples are filled with dreams. And to each peoples, they dream their dreams in the darkest hours of the night. And when they awaken, only wish to carry these dreams into their waking life. And so it is that in the patterns of stars in the sky, people see all manner of things important to themselves, according to their way of life. If it is spring, you can see Leo in the southeast. Some tribes saw the mountain lion, Memegweshi. Setting towards the west is Orion. Many tribes saw him as a great warrior or chieftain. In the east, Butes now is rising. The Greeks called him the herdsman. To the Hopi, he was Sotukmang, the nephew of the Creator. These are beautiful patterns, but most of the sky is a mess, and no patterns at all can be seen. And there is a story to explain even this, and why coyotes cry in the night. On that first morning of creation so long ago, the men and animals were different. For they all spoke the same language, and they knew each other's hearts and minds. There was great understanding and peace, sharing and love. And when they looked out at this creation, they remarked to one another, saying, "Ah, what great beauty there is in this world. So filled with beauty is this creation world that there is not a shadow in any place, but a great rainbow of colors stretches everywhere." Amazed they were at the beauty of this place. And so it was, and in that amazing beauty, in that clean, fresh new world of creation, they came to know some of the things of the Creator who made it, and His mysteries, His laws for all to live. But when darkness began to fall, that first evening of creation so long ago, all men and animals grew hushed upon the earth, and still to look into the nighttime sky to see what wonders therein would lie. But when darkness finally came, that first night of creation so long ago, there was nothing to be seen, for the sky was black and empty as death. And the men and animals looking there were surprised, and they called to one another in the darkness of that place, "Oh, this day world is filled all with beauty. The day world is so filled with beauty that there is no shadow in any place. But there, look, the nighttime sky is black and empty as death, and seems unfinished indeed." And our mighty Father heard these words from where He sits beyond the sky. He considered them, taking them to heart, and He thought to Himself, saying, "It is true what they say. The creation is unfinished indeed, but I shall put something there in the sky, something so fine and so filled with beauty, that when they see this thing, they will truly come to know something of me." And so, the mighty Father thought through that night of creation so long ago, of all wonders and beautiful things to put there in the sky, and He finally decided to fill it with bright, shiny points of light, the stars, in a perfect and fine, beautiful pattern, just like beads. And so, by the dawn of that second early morning of creation time so long ago, our mighty Father returned to the earth to finish His creation work. And He walked out onto the prairie with a great bag, and He began to gather the little flowers Many flowers did he pick, and filled this great bag with these. Heavy was the burden, and full the bag was with stars. And these he would place in the sky just so, in a beautiful and fine pattern, just like woven beads. And then he looked about and cut a long stick. This he would use. He would place each star on the end and put them in the sky just so, perfect, like beads. And then he sought out the highest place in the land. A great mountain did he find, and from the top of this he could place the stars in the sky up high, out of reach, and so they would last until the end of creation time. And now when our great Father had finished all this work and climbed that great high mountain, still it was daylight, and he was tired from his labor. And so he decided to rest himself a while and wait for the nighttime sky so more perfect to put up his stars in a fine and perfect pattern like beads. And when he reached the top, he set down that great bag upon the ground. In the shade of a great tree that grew in that place, he laid himself upon the earth, and it wasn't long before he was sound asleep. And then one came along, the one we call Coyote. Now Coyote is a dog, and like all dogs, always he is thinking of things to eat. Always he is looking for food. The only thing in his heart and mind is good things to eat. And he comes across this place where sleeps the Creator, and he is surprised, saying to himself, there is the Creator, and he is sound asleep. And next to him is a great bag filled with something. I bet there are good things to eat. Oh, I know the great Father has given us all enough to eat, but I bet that he has saved the best things for himself. I am going to take that bag and look inside and see. And if there are good things to eat, I will eat some, and then I will put it back before he awakens, and he will never know that it was me. And so Coyote crawls very careful and silent right up next to the Creator, and he takes that great bag in his teeth, and he runs off to find a safe place to hide and look inside. But as he runs, he trips and falls on the rocks of that place, and the bag tears open in his teeth, and the stars spill out and splash all across the sky. A great mess indeed. Just then, our mighty Father awakens from his sleep, and the first thing he sees upon opening his eyes are his beautiful stars scattered all across the skies, and no fine pattern at all like beads. And he looks down, and he sees Coyote standing there with that bag in his teeth, and he knows Coyote's heart, and he calls to Coyote, scolding, "Coyote, look what you have done. For I wish to put those stars in the sky in a perfect pattern just like beads, so that when men and animals look there to see, such beauty there would be, that they would come at last to know something truly of me. Now what will they think? Look at this mess you have made." And Coyote looked up, and shame filled his heart as tears filled his eyes, and Coyote began to cry. And so it is. This is why, when we look up at the nighttime sky, we see stars scattered every which way like grains of sand, the great mess that Coyote has made. And this is why, when darkness comes to the lands of the earth, coyotes everywhere, the great-grandchildren of that first coyote of long ago, look up with shame, and coyotes cry in the night. Now, if you look into this part of the sky, you will see 6 stars that are called the Pleiades. But there are actually 7 stars if you have very good eyes. Now, when we look there, we see 7 sisters, and one is in the background, hidden. You see, long ago in our land, there was a young man out fasting. His sweat lodge stood at the end of a lake where no one ever came. And there was a broad beach on both sides. One evening he heard something. The sounds of songs, faint and distant, came to his ear. He did not know what it was. He looked everywhere, but there was no one to be seen. Then the sounds were clearer and clearer, and he realized they came from the sky over the lake. And the young man listened, and he thought the voices came from the beach nearby. He couldn't tell which way. He crept slowly down to the lake, through the reeds and grasses, and the singing grew more distant. Then through the reeds he saw 7 young women dancing about in the light of the stars. Just then a pebble slipped under his foot, and the women sprang into a large basket and vanished into the sky. Now the young man went back to his fasting lodge. The next evening he listened. The air was very still, the water very quiet. The stars were shining brightly. He heard again the sound of faraway voices. He heard the distant songs, so he crept to the edge of the lake through the reeds and grasses. He saw that great basket come down with the 7 maidens inside. They danced together under the light of the stars, and then each one danced alone, dancing in turn. And one maiden was more beautiful than her sisters. And when he saw this one, the young man forgot. He made a sound with his voice, and the maidens vanished into the sky. Now every evening, the maidens came down to dance on the beach. It was a broad beach, and no one ever came to that end of the lake. They danced under the stars when the air was still, and they sang their beautiful songs. And the young man watched them. One evening, after watching for some time, the young man rushed among the women and seized that most beautiful sister. The other maidens sprang into the basket, but the young man caught the basket edge with one hand, and they all fell to the earth together, and the maidens were very frightened. One said, "We are 7 sisters. We live in the skyland. Often you see us when you look into the sky. But at this season, when the air is still and the lake is quiet, we come here to dance in the starlight." The young man was so taken with the young woman's beauty that he insisted she marry him. But she said, "I cannot marry you until you come and live with me in the skyland." So the young man went into the skyland with her. And I know this is true because even today, the 7 sisters are in the sky. And as I have said at the beginning, 6 are clearly seen, but the 7th star sits back in the shadow with her husband. There are more than stars to look at in the night, for my people believe in spirits and ghosts that roam the darkness. These stories tell of a great hero and how he dealt with these night beings. When I was little, my father and my uncles used to get together at night and tell stories about Kuloskap. And they told stories about Kuloskap and the ghosts, and these were among my favorites. Now on this one certain night long ago, Kuloskap and his friend Paganuk the otter were sitting by their fire. A small fire it was, so they could look up to the nighttime sky and muse upon the stars. And then all of a sudden, a stillness came to the forest. Strange it was. And they knew that all in the forest were shivering and shaking with fright. And there were sounds coming out of the forest. Strange sounds indeed. Oh, this would be a strange night. All of a sudden, a blue ghost came streaking out of the forest, his hair snapping in the wind. Kuloskop looked and laughed. And Paganuk, he was afraid, and he hid behind Kuloskop. And then a great red ghost jumped out of the ground right in front of them, and he flailed his arms in the air. And Paganuk had enough, and he hid in the bushes behind Kuloskop. Kuloskop, he just laughed and mocked and treated the ghost with disdain. Great a hero he was. Then a white ghost came out of the bushes, and terrible was he, and he spat his teeth out on the ground at Kuloskop's feet. Kuloskop laughed and gathered the teeth to make a necklace. And Otter swooned with fright. One after another, these ghosts came forward. Green ones, white ones, horrible ghosts, ugly ghosts. They grimaced their faces. They made strange sounds indeed. And Kuloskop laughed, and he made faces. He enjoyed this. And he called out in the darkness of that place, "This is entertainment indeed." And the ghost gave up in despair. But there was one little tiny ghost. And he was kind of a pest to the other ghosts, for he was a young ghost, and not very big indeed. And not much did he ever do. He had not even earned one feather in his life so far. And the ghosts didn't like this little ghost. So they decided they would embarrass him by putting him up to facing Kuloskop alone and bring that little ghost to shame. They grabbed the little ghost and they pushed him forward, prodding and saying, "Now you go scare Kuloskop." The little ghost, so shy indeed, crept forward, hesitating and shaking. He came into the presence of our great hero. And Kuloskop saw this poor little ghost. He was a great man. Great compassion did Kuloskop have in his heart, great care indeed. And he felt sorry and took pity on this poor little tiny ghost. He could see that the ghost was frightened and shy indeed. And so Kuloskop, in his compassion, decided that he would act afraid and make this little ghost feel big. And so Kuloskop jumped up from his fire and let out a great yell. And he ran and he hid in the bushes with Otter, where he lay passed out from fear. And Kuloskop shook the bushes to show he was shaking and afraid. The little ghost, upon seeing this, took great heart indeed, and swelled up his chest and said, "I must be a great ghost after all." And he walked round the fire with his chest puffed up, strutting in the light of the fire of that place. And he picked up Kuloskop's feathers, and his pipe bag, and his great pipe that Kuloskop loved so much. And he carried these off his trophies, and he went back boasting to all the other ghosts, the red ghost, the blue ghost, the black ghost, and the one who spit his teeth upon the ground, and the one who flew with his hair snapping in the wind, and the ones who made terrible sounds. And they were amazed to see the little ghost with these things. When Kuloskop looked and saw these things, and that his pipe, his bag, and his feathers were gone, he sat and he pondered and decided that after all, sometimes it's not such a good idea to make big things of little things.